faster than the time it takes to brew a cup of tea.
High Tea Mystique reminds you that no experience is too big or too small to teach us something about ourselves.
Join us for a cup of tea as we steep into adulting, womanhood, independence, and more.
We're all in the clear. Here we are, Halloween episode.
Party of two.
Party of two.
Sad face.
Sad face.
Tear rolling down my cheek.
Tear rolling. Yes, we're sad to inform you that
Our third member cannot be here today.
yeah,
For a good cause.
for a good cause.
I mean, is it? Is it a good cause?
I mean, yes,
It's work.
work.
I guess we all need that money
Yeah.
to pay
Oh,
for
I
life.
guess.
I guess.
I like how you put that. I guess.
I guess. I mean, we could revert back to hunter-gathering times and trade for goods, but you know,
nothing is perfect. I guess.
capitalism.
Yeah. But here we are, sitting together. We are, surrounded by ambiance in our little vibes. This is an allusion to what I'm gonna be for Halloween. I'm gonna
Mhm.
dress up as Toadette.
This is my little bud. I don't know if you can see it in the camera.
Yeah.
I have a skeleton frog on my head.
Skeleton frog on Pam's head.
It's my companion for this episode.
Yeah, which we found out, thankfully, from Kat that frogs are one of the many forms of familiars for witches. So
Period.
there you go.
You know, I saw this is not good. I saw a dead dried up frog in the entrance of my house the other day, and I don't know if it's that cat that kind of lingers. There's this neighborhood cat in my neighborhood that I clearly was brought in by my next door neighbors because they have a cat house tower thing on the
Mhm.
outside. But she has a limp, and they just let her, live her best life outside, and she's always in front of my house. So I have a feeling she brought me a little present.
Yeah, cats also.
Sorry, George.
Another familiar of witches is cats. Maybe this was like a familiar competition between them.
Maybe. And the
Maybe.
cat won.
Yeah, the cat won. You can't win them all. Amphibians, you can't win them all.
Nope.
Well, welcome everybody, nonetheless, to our Halloween episode. Happy Halloween! This will be releasing on the week of the 31st, and we're super
On
excited.
The day of the
On
31st.
the day of the
So
31st.
today is Halloween.
Today is
Boo.
Halloween. Boo. And this is actually the end of our spooky season. Yeah. This is, tear rolling down. This marks the end of our spooky series with our last installation. And our last installation is going to be a great follow-up to our last episode, because last episode we talked about death and all the wonderful, terrifying, interesting things about it. And today we're going to talk about life after death. And we're going to be talking about some of our beliefs, some of our interactions, some of our experiences with people who may still be roaming here, even after death. And rightfully so, we're going to be talking about ghosts. Ooh. This is where I cue in like my ghost hunters, like this is my
Who
do
you
you
call?
believe?
Not her.
Not me. No. No, don't call me. I won't have any power over the living nor the dead. So
Nope.
yeah, no. We also have some fine accompaniment of tea, which is why I'm also grieving that Kat's not here, because I'm gonna do my best to talk about our pumpkin spice rooibos tea.
It's so good.
It is very good. I'm almost so sad because I was so looking forward to Kat trying this, but I'm gonna bring her a pack. So
Yeah,
we're gonna
okay.
make up for it.
We'll sneak it in again. Just because October and Spooktober's over doesn't mean fall has ended.
No, not by any means. No.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, just to quote some things that Kat has already said about rooibos tea, it's an herbal tea. And of course, its origin is of the African continent. It has a great support of your antioxidants, your brain activity, And I think it's also really useful for recovery, I believe. She said that about running and drinking rooibos tea after running.
And just a quick little shout out. Our tea today, although I typically am not a sweetener for tea gal, I had to make an exception because my boss's one of my boss's daughters, shout out to Kai, she actually got us this cute little honey pot, honey jar, for us to use in our podcast. So we are sweetening our tea with this today, and honestly, it pairs perfectly with the pumpkin chai.
It really does.
Like, I'm not a huge fan of honey
It
or
does.
sugars in my tea, but this is a perfect blend. So thank you, Kai.
Thank you, Kai. And I don't know if I pinpointed that earlier, but this is a pumpkin spice rooibos tea.
Hmm.
And of course, we have the honey that complemented it well. Um, I really miss Cat.
Me too.
I think in the spirit of also Halloween, we're experimenting with pumpkin spice, as I'm sure all of us are. So, try this tea out. Don't just have it in Starbucks coffee. Pumpkin spice is good for all. Nice accents of cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves,
All cozy.
cozy. So even though we're going to be talking about a spooky topic, join us and get comfortable, right? And of course, just to talk about ghosts around Halloween, besides us trying to be spooky about it, ghosts have kind of always been about Halloween, right?
For real?
Yeah. Do you know why, Pam?
No.
Okay, I'll tell you.
Tell me. Learned me.
So Halloween actually came from the Samhain tradition, which is a Celtic pagan religion of harvest. It's a celebration of harvest that begins at the end of summer, and also into the last harvest before winter. So because it was such a harsh transition of like pretty much your last bounty into, I want to say, a desert, right? A food that many Celtic people went into during the winter. It was almost like this belief that when they celebrated the last harvest, there was this aura of like death and spirits starting to take away, the life out of farmers' crops. So it was, Celtic people started to believe that ghosts would actually walk around and be part of the Samhain festival when people were just in the middle of celebrating their last harvest. And of course, when Christian missionaries started seeing this religion, they started introducing All Saints Day, which is November 1st, which is kind of like a fun way to describe it is like you survived, All Hallows Eve, right? And you've survived the kind of ghosts that came into our world. You scared them away with your costume, right? Because that's actually what dressing up was meant to do, scare away ghosts and evil spirits. So now we get to survive and get into the end of the year. So All Saints Day was November 1st. So today, Halloween, is the start of your ghost marathon. So congratulations, everybody. Hope we all make it out okay. And we see each other on the other end of November 1st. But first, let's talk about ghosts and what we're experienced with as far as October 31st. Ghosts is a funny topic because I feel like no matter who you talk to, there's always an opinion about ghosts and if they exist, what they look like, what they do, what they're meant for. So let's start off with talking about that. Pam, what do you think about ghosts? Do you believe in ghosts?
I 100% totally believe in ghosts. I have never seen one, but I totally believe that their presence, their energy, their ability to be on this plane with us is something that is completely possible. And again, as you guys have heard in our previous episodes, and if you haven't, I wasn't really raised very religiously. I was raised very superstitiously. And so for me, it kind of makes sense that I would believe in something like that. But I feel like even if we were to think of it in the religious context, maybe not the idea of ghosts, but the idea of spirits is still in there because of the concept of heaven, you know? So,
Definitely. I agree.
in terms of ghosts being here in our realm and our dimension, I totally believe it. I have some stories to back these claims up,
Oh,
even though
we've
I've
got
never seen
time
them.
for stories. We've got time for stories
Oh, yeah.
today.
Um, and I also don't try to fuck with them. I always see these people with Ouija boards and the Ouija app and all of this stuff. And they came out with like a pink one for Barbie or whatever. I would rather be respectful of something that may or may not exist than risk opening some sort of energy or portal or way for maleficent spirit or ghost to enter my world and cause potential harm or anything like that. I mean, long-winded answer just to say yes, I do believe in ghosts. But you got to be careful, Not everybody can be out here like the Mystery Gang and or Ghostbusters and disintegrating them, or helping them move on, not disintegrate. Respect.
Right. Exercise, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that you mention not being raised religious because that's one of the first things I feel like people think of. It's like, oh, heaven, hell, God, no underworld. And I'll be honest, where, you know, I as a child always thought ghosts existed because of my religion, right? So you're right. I think it's very entwined. Like, one of the sacraments is like, the spirit of the Holy Ghost. So that's literally
Yeah.
that's literally
Or
entwined.
what is it? The ghost of Christmas present, past, and future.
Oh yeah, and that's just, lovable Charles Dickens, making a Christmas carol. Um I think also my belief in ghosts has kind of stemmed in movies, right? Because now that you mention Ghosts of Christmas Past, I've
Mm-hmm.
always seen movies where ghosts have been vital, right? As part of helping a character understand something.
Hello, Casper.
Yeah, or the main protagonist learning something. Yeah, I think that's why I've always wanted to believe in ghosts too, because they seem like such a part of the human experience.
Side note: one
Mhm.
of the times, not a movie, but a book that made Ghost feel so real, and the interactions that the ghost had with the main character is this book series called The Mediator. And
Mm.
I read this book series. I'm not a huge book reader. It's really if I read a really good book, I will get into it and do like a marathon of reading it. But to get into actually reading takes a really long time for me because I prefer to play video games. But in middle school, I came across this book series called The Mediator by oh no, I don't remember the author.
Shall I Google?
Please.
Shall I
And
Google?
basically, this book series is all about ooh, the cats are getting feisty. There might be a spirit in this room. It's about a girl who sees ghosts, right? And so she eventually learns that her job is to mediate with these ghosts and help them move on. But there's a ghost that she meets in the house that she lives in. Well, I also forgot the ghost's name, but all I remember was that the ghost and the description of that ghost was really hot.
Is it Meg Cabot?
Yes, Meg
Okay.
Cabot. Shout out to you. I love you so much. I love your books. At least I did when I was younger.
She has pretty good ratings on Goodreads.
Hell
So there
yeah.
you go.
There you go. Read The Mediator. And so that book, that book series is also something that kind of helped me cement the idea that ghosts were real just because of the kinds of interactions that would happen, right? Like he would come in her times of dire need. They would have conversations. He would tell
Mm-hmm.
her information about stuff going on in the afterlife that she wouldn't know or would not have access to, or information about other ghosts that she might have seen, that he has seen around during that time. Almost like it's very, my idea of ghosts is very, what's the movie, Hocus Pocus, the way that what's the name of that guy?
Thackeray Binks.
Yes, the way that he shows up afterwards,
Thackeray
right?
Binks. Oh
And how he
yes.
helps out.
Yeah.
That's my concept of ghosts and how they are in this world, besides like the mischievous ones.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Mischievous, separate category later on. Mischievous ghosts. We'll
Mm-hmm.
cue that. Um, well, yeah, I agree with everything you said. I do agree that ghosts exist because I think there are things that you learn from the physical world, and there are things that you learn from the metaphysical world, right? And there are things that you learn from many planes, right, of
Mm-hmm.
existence here. And ghosts are one of them, right? We Kat had mentioned, I remember, kind of this idea that things appear, to give you signs, like when people die.
Yeah.
And I want to say that's true because that's part of the ghost, right? Like Thackeray Binks was a cat still remaining in this physical world, right? Quite literally and explicitly, right? Because of Hocus Pocus. But um I think that's kind of the effect, right? Like when your uncle passes away and there's a squirrel, and because that was Cat's story,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the energy of the afterlife seeping into your physical world. So yeah, I do believe that as well. When my mom passed away, I felt really sensitive about like strong gusts of wind passing around me. So maybe that's a type of ghost apparition, or maybe that's just the tingling, like, your sixth sense kind of peaking.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like there's some bridge there, right, from our plane of afterlife to, living. So we've talked about one form, or a couple of forms actually, of ghosts, right? Do we see them being part of every aspect, I think, or are there different forms that we can see ghosts taking in our lives?
That's kind of hard for me to answer because I've never, again, seen a ghost, right? Um, but I feel that if I were to see a ghost, and based off just stories that I've also heard,
Mm,
which I think is one of our questions, so I'll hold until later. Um, I feel like they have a way of communicating, either appearing in front of us, right, as a person, or in ways like you were mentioning, like maybe not possession. The best way that I feel I can describe it is in an episode of, what's the name of that show? Supernatural. Um, there's a point where Dean is the older brother, the younger
Sam.
brother, Sam. There's a
Mm-hmm.
point where Sam dies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's his first encounter with death, and the angel of death. And he is in, I guess the best term I can think of is, what is it? Pa, the middle realm with a P.
Purgatory.
Purgatory. So it's I'm sorry. Last night was rough. If you can't
Sam is
tell.
keeping me on my toes out
I
here.
know.
My afterlife knowledge.
So it's almost as if he's in purgatory, right? He hasn't passed on to the next life. He's still stuck there. And he's trying to communicate with his brother, and in the ways that he does that, like he'll try to make enough energy to make things move or items to move. So I don't know if it would be necessarily possession, that they completely take control of an item, but I definitely think, in terms of sending bursts of energy and sending things flying out, or trying to materialize themselves um physically, in our realm. I think those are ways that they can kind of manifest themselves.
Yeah, and it's funny because I thought I haven't seen Supernatural, so I thought you were gonna touch on something about ghosts of things that were never really alive but have that power. Like I feel like death is kind of a ghost that lives like in this physical plane. Like I think there's definitely a type of ode to things like in certain religions there are ghosts that are kind of tied to gods, right? So think of it in very much the sense of like, Zeus kind of morphing himself right into a human being, but in other religions it's like gods will appear to you as apparitions, right? So I always thought that was always an interesting kind of like exception for some religions. Like some people were like, okay, this is a ghost, right? Or this isn't a ghost because it's a god. But no one ever really said that something had to be alive for it to be a ghost. You know?
I would say I would agree with that, because I see ghosts not as these floating things or projections of someone who used to be alive that now is dead. I see it as an energy, right? Like a spirit. And so our soul is pretty much an energy source. And that energy source just remains in this realm. So I think of it as energy and not so much as, I don't know, somebody dies and then this is still, how can I explain this?
Like an outline of their human body and just
Yeah.
keeping on existing in
Like
our
it's not
world.
like a mushroom coming in and thriving off of the death. It's just their spirit, kind of like Avatar.
Their spirit, like
Hmm.
Avatar.
Their energy. It just
Mm-hmm.
comes and recycles and comes back and contributes in other ways.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, what have been our most recent experiences with ghosts?
All right. This is the fun part.
Yeah,
This is
this
what
is
I've
the
been
fun
waiting
part.
for. So, I actually have a story that happened to someone in my family.
Oh,
So, I have family that lives in California, and I also have a cousin that lives in Peru.
okay.
And from my dad's side, and she had visited our family in California, and one of my cousins, her youngest daughters in California, she was able to see ghosts. Like she's always been able to see spirits when she was young, and apparently the house that they lived in, there were two spirits that this girl saw. So her daughter would always talk about a little girl who was dressed in like colonial times with the bonnet and like two pigtails. And there was another spirit that she saw when my cousin was visiting them. She was telling me about it when I was visiting her in Peru. That when she was there visiting our family in California, there was one time that they were all kind of just playing around and laughing, and the little girl just kind of stands there and is like staring at the doorway. And finally, my cousin notices, and she's like, "Oh, like what are you looking at, or is something there?" And or no, I'm sorry. The little girl asked my cousin, "Oh, um how would you feel if there was somebody like just watching us right now, or like an old man or whatever?" And I guess my cousin didn't really know how to respond to that because she didn't know where it was coming from, and told her like somewhere along the lines of like, "Oh, I mean, as long as they're not doing anything, or it's okay," or like, "What do you mean by that?" And so then the daughter goes, "Oh, okay, because there's a man standing at the doorway and he's been staring at us, like watching us play." And my cousin freaked out. And then there was another story with the little ghost girl with the pigtails that the daughter would see. That one time, my cousin, so the mom, was cooking, right? Was cooking lunch or dinner, and they were missing an ingredient. And so they all left. She was cooking, she was cutting something up with the cutting board and left the knife next to the cutting board. And then when they all left, nobody was in the house, okay, for this to happen. When they all left to go to the grocery store and came back, the knife was gone. They couldn't find the knife. They looked all over the kitchen, all over the first floor, And my cousin was like, "What happened to the knife? Where did it go? Like, where did I put it? Did I take it somewhere?" And so of course, what does the daughter say? She goes to her mom and says, "Oh, I know where the knife is." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And she told her, "The little girl took it." And she's like, "What do you mean?" "Oh, the girl with the pigtails, like she hid it in the attic. She wanted to play." And so they go to the attic, they open the attic door, and there is the knife that she was using. I was so scared. I don't know what I would have done.
I mean, what can you do?
I don't know.
Like what I want to know is like, I mean, we see these things happen on TV all the time, and it's so cinematic, even like hearing
Yeah.
you talk about it right now. But on a real, like, what do you do? Because movies will say like you run away, you grab your child, you leave the house, but where do you go?
Yeah.
Where is there to hide? I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
Oh, yeah,
Jinx.
Jinx, you know me a Sprite.
I jinxed you first. What about you?
So I have a similar. I guess we'll start off with like, since you spoke about a family member who kind of has experiences, I also want to start there too.
Mm-hmm.
Um I have an older cousin, and for the sake of her privacy, I'm going to call her Sarah. And Sarah has always been super, um I want to say, sensitive to ghosts and things that kind of exist in the in between. She has always been this way, kind of similar to your family member. I remember she would tell me, she's much older than me, so she's able to kind of talk about the things that she's seen much more eloquently. But when she first started telling her mom things, her mom was really concerned, and her mom would tell her, like, Sarah, I think, we need to go to a therapist, or, we need to do things. And she would get really upset because the things that she would tell her mom is like, you know, she would say things like, you're missing this family member. This person was always here in my crib, and you're telling me that there wasn't any man there. And she would get really upset. Like, she would blame her mom for basically like things like removing people from her life, when that's just like. And by the way, just to give away what was happening there, my cousin Sarah was a baby, and she always remembered this woman, right, watching her in her nursery. And um, it was a woman who looked exactly like her grandmother, right? And that woman was, rocking in the chair, and, she took care of her like any other person would. Like, she remembers this woman, like, picking her up when she was crying, putting her back down. And she saw a picture of her, and she said, "Look, like, that's the woman. That's the woman I'm talking about." And her mother was like, "That's your great grandmother. She died the year you were born, so you never got to meet her. She died, like 3 or 4 months before you were born." And I remember, my cousin Sarah was like, was so upset. She was like, "No, she didn't die. She's there. She's there." So it was quite traumatizing for her, I think, growing up and being that sensitive, because
Wow.
um she kind of felt very much like people kept on putting like a hand over her eyes type of feeling. Like, I
Right.
see that clearly, and then her parents or her family are like, "No, you don't. Like, you don't see that. There's no such thing. That person died." And then it was almost to the point where her mom had lost the type of, I guess, skepticism, right? That kind of made them say, like, "No, you're seeing things, or you're lying, or that thing." And she just kind of like let up and kind of, because even though they're also religious, they kind of didn't believe in ghosts just like again like haunting around the house, right? They believe very much that like if you're dead, you're in heaven or hell, right? That's it. But they had no choice but to loosen up because this kept on happening. And um my cousin Sarah would like to this day will be um I remember vividly, just to kind of fast forward, like she and I were in a car together. She was driving and I was getting out of the car because we had just parked in her driveway, and she said, don't get out of the car, close the door. So I did. I sat in there and she was playing music, and she was just like, at the driver's seat, like, and I was like, why are we waiting here? And she's like, I just need you to sit there for like 15 more minutes. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And she's like, nothing, just sit there. And I was like, but what? And I was getting frustrated. And she's like, I just need you to trust me and stay there. And I was like, okay. And then I remember literally like just giving up, being kind of frustrated and
How old
confused.
were you?
I was 12. I was 12
Okay.
and she was 22. So she's
Mm.
10 years older than me. And I remember hearing something like ping on a mailbox that was like I want to say, because we were parked in her driveway, it was a house next to her, because those mailboxes are metallic, so you can hear like the pang if something hits it. And then I was like, oh no. And she's like, don't look back, just keep looking for it. And I was like, okay. and and then she looked in her rearview mirror, and she looked in wait, which one is the rearview mirror?
Rear view is the one in
Rearview
front.
mirror,
Uh-huh.
and then the side view mirror. So
Uh-huh.
she checked both of those, and then she's like, okay, let's go. So we went in the house, and then she locked the door, and she put she used to wear this little necklace with like a bottle of salt in it, so she put that on. And then
Mm-hmm.
I was like, all right, so you're gonna tell me what happened? And she's like, so I didn't want you to get out because there were 4 or 5 things running around up and down the street, and one of them was really close to your window. And I don't really know what they were going to do, but I felt that they were recognizing that I could see them. So I didn't know what else to do but just sit in the car and kind of wait for them to move on. And she gets really scared of that because she would tell me all the time that like as she's gotten older, she's kind of recognized that when whatever it is recognizes that she can see them, it gets much more aggressive.
Right.
And she said that she just kind of had to control her reaction to things, and she didn't know what else to do in that moment but just kind of freeze and just pretend that nothing was going on. So and then I remember like just chills like obviously coming down my spine when she told me that. I was terrified. I did not sleep that night.
Who could?
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite terrifying. And then I didn't actually connect the two things, like the mailbox and the thing that she told me, until the morning after, because we actually went out. We went out the next day and we checked. Oh well, not that we checked because this wasn't really a mindful decision, but we drove past the neighbor's house, and the neighbor was actually in the middle of like picking up the mailbox like from the floor, because it had just like broken off its little holder thing, because it wasn't wood, but it was like a, I don't know, it was like a dolphin or something holding it. It was
Oh,
a weird
wow.
statue. So
So
yeah.
they broke it.
Yeah, well, I don't think it was broken, but it did come off, which I found strange.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so it was it was quite an experience. I remember that was like a Friday or a Thursday that came before a Marco Island road trip, and I did not sleep on that road trip.
What if it was a Friday the 13th?
Oh, I don't know actually. I don't think so.
Remembered?
I think I would have totally been like, I knew it, Friday the 13th. It
Okay.
always happens on that day.
Wow.
But yeah, that's my, I feel like my family sensitivity. I don't have anywhere near a sense like that.
So I'll share this one story. Um, I don't know truly what the chill was. So last week I went to Washington D.C. for a work conference,
Mm.
and on the in one of the evenings we took advantage, me and my boss, to partake in a ghost tour and learn more about the ghosts of Washington D.C. Because we both love that kind of stuff. And one of the first stops that we did was the Supreme Court. That's where the ghost tour started. Ironic.
Appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
appropriate.
And the first story that the guy kind of starts off with, um, he's explaining that before the Supreme Court, it used to be, I forgot the name already. It was a different building, and then I believe the building be- was a prison. I think I could be jumbling my buildings, but I think the Supreme Court before used to be an old building, like run down. Then it became a prison, and then um it was rebought or something like that, and then transformed into the Supreme Court. But before it was a prison, there was a woman who, I can't remember the exact details, but I believe she was accused for conspiring with the Lincoln assassination, I want to say.
Mm.
And there was no evidence against her, and she was just accused because she owned the building. I think that building, what it was before, that's where they conspired or something like that, for the assassination. And so I do remember the woman's name because I looked her up, and her name is Mary Surratt.
Mm.
And the guy was explaining that, um, when we were looking at the Supreme Court, you see windows, right? And he says that there have been stories of people who have seen a woman dressed in like dark old colonial clothes, like a dress, and that you'll see a woman from one window and almost as if they jump to the next one, right? As if they were walking across a hall. But between every single window in the Supreme Court, there is solid wall,
Mm.
solid concrete. So it is physically impossible for a person to walk through the windows as if they were walking down the hall. And so he says, if you see a woman do that, most likely it's the ghost of Mary Surratt. And so one of the people that we were there with, they said that they thought that they saw a figure in the window, which I saw too, but I thought I didn't see it go between walls, so I attributed it to maybe it's just somebody who was working there, because there were some people there, like the lights were on, you could see that there were people there working. The outfit looked a little suspicious.
A
But what
little.
I did feel was, and I didn't feel this with any other one of the stories that he told us, but I felt a chill down my spine as he was
Mm.
describing her, and when I saw that person.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it was Mary, maybe it
Yeah.
wasn't, but that chill down your spine that you get is the most, ugh, like
Yeah.
I don't even know how to explain it. It's not nerve-wracking, but it
Mm.
definitely puts you on your tiptoes,
Mm-hmm.
like I fully understood the whole spine chilling, hair rising sort of feeling that people describe, because you kind of envision it, but it's different when you get to actually feel it.
Oh yeah.
So that was really interesting, a
Mm-hmm.
really interesting experience that happened to me. But I also learned about other buildings
Yeah.
and the ghosts of our wonderful
Nation's
capital.
capital. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I I find ghosts to be also a fun way to kind of engage with history. I
Yeah.
Yeah, right? I think, you kind of learn about the underbelly of history a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like not many people know who it was Mary Surratt.
Mary Surratt.
Right. Not many people know Mary Surratt's chapter, obviously, in the
Mm-hmm.
grand event that was like Abraham Lincoln's assassination, but it was still somebody who lived and who was in that, time. And it's such a great outline, right, of moments in history and moments in time. I love ghost stories for that reason too. I love ghost tours like that. I feel like it's such a great interaction
Yeah.
with a place.
We need to go to Salem,
We
Massachusetts, and
do.
go to a ghost tour there and update you all and have.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have like
Have an
recording
episode over
there.
there.
That
Yeah.
would be so cool.
Yeah, that's gonna be a GoFundMe for High Tea Mystique.
A GoFundMe and
GoFundMe.
establishing us as a business.
Yeah,
Put it on as a business expense.
put it on the business expense.
Yes.
Yeah,
Put it on the card. The
put
business
it on the
card.
card.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
think the only other ghost story that I heard that evening that was just as creepy, because there were other ones, right? Like so one of the more ridiculous ones was apparently there's a ghost in the Capitol building where the person who was creating the dome, the architect, he didn't get a chance to see it come into fruition. He had designed it and he was in the middle of building it, but apparently um there was some scaffolding, like wood scaffolding that he had put up, and then something happened and he fell, right? He fell and died on impact, and so it to he never got to see it completed. And so sometimes people will hear as if there's work going on the dome, but nothing's there, obviously. Um, but then the son came, like the son of that architect, like died in a similar fashion,
Mm.
and also did not get to see it or something like that. And there was also an assassination. So it wasn't an assassination. I think it was two congressmen. I don't remember their names. But they were having a dispute and an argument, and apparently they were seen brawling prior and having like a discussion. They were always in disagreement. And then one day, one of the congressmen went up to the guy who, while he was sleeping, and just shot him, like straight
Oh gosh.
point blank. And it was ruled self defense,
Oh.
as if it was a part of the quarrel that they had way earlier. How that's self defense, there's I won't say anymore.
Yeah.
But that's not the interesting one. That was just one of the more ridiculous ones. But the scariest one, besides the feeling that I had with Mary Surratt, I don't remember the address, but we were taken to a building, right? And it was a building that was acquired by it was a famous local legend sort of thing. And this guy, there was this building that was owned for several generations by a family, and then finally this guy did something, either he came across money or something like that, and then he decided to buy the building because he was renting the basement for a while. And there was one time when he was living down in the basement that he decided to take a nap, started a fire with logs, and this was not even like 50 years ago. Um, and he started the fire, took a nap, and then after a while he woke up, and basically what the guy was describing, this guy woke up in a sleep paralysis. Like he couldn't move. He could see a dark figure on top of him. Like it was a figure. He could tell it was a man by the shape of, like, it was broad shoulders and all of that, but the face was almost smudged and he couldn't make out the face, and he was just sitting there terrified and couldn't move and could almost smell smoke or something like that. um and then finally he was trying to move or blink or whatever, he was able to break free, and he saw that the fire was spreading. Like there was actually a fire in his apartment. And when he went to get up and get his dog and try to leave or douse the thing or whatever, he looked to the corner and he saw the same figure, like in the corner of the room. And then several years later, he still decided to own this house for whatever reason. um and but this time he wasn't living in the basement, he was living in the main area, right?
Oh.
And so there was some person that he knew, some woman, and she needed money and he lent her money. And then finally he came up, like, she's like, yeah, I'll pay you back, whatever. Lo and behold, she comes back to him. It's like, I'm so sorry. What I thought was going to bring me money, like, I'm not going to be able to pay you back what you gave me, but I can do this instead for you. Apparently she was a very talented painter, And so she said, if you want, I can paint something for you, right? And so he said, okay, paint me this house. For whatever reason, he wanted to remember the house and wanted a memory of the house. And she painted the house. He gave it to her. He looked at the painting, and on the window of the painting, he saw that she had somehow painted that figure. The figure was there in the painting. And so he went back and contacted her and was like, hey, what is this figure doing? Like, why did you paint that? And she's like, what are you talking about? I didn't paint anything. There was no black figure that I painted. So somehow that figure manifests itself into into that painting and it's like haunting this guy forever. But he still wants a memory of it.
But he still wants. I mean, not a memory of that, but the ghost will not be ignored.
I know. But yeah,
Um,
those are the interesting ghost stories I learned last week.
Yeah, I think my travelings have been much further away, so I'm not going to be able to remember like what I inherited from ghost stories when I traveled. But I mean, for anybody who hasn't gone to St. Augustine, I would definitely check it out. St. Augustine, the oldest like establishment in America, port city, a lot of rich history of not just Florida, but colonization, Native Americans. I mean, it's an intense richness. There's something in the air of places that are like older cities that you just feel. You just feel something. It's like the ghosts of a city that's just enveloping you with how much time, how much energy, how much the city has seen. And I feel like St. Augustine has that. There's a part of the tour that I'll never forget because this isn't necessarily a ghost story, but I'm sure that there's spirits there. So in the famous fort, right, that is in St. Augustine, it's basically a place for battle and regrouping and military organization, and of course part of it is a prison. So I remember our ghost tour that we ended up taking, that was one of the stops, and they spoke about how the Native Americans that were there were Seminoles, right? And Seminoles were extremely tall and muscular, and they were captured a lot of the times and put in prisons, and they could actually, their heads could see out of the windows in prisons.
Whoa.
So they basically compiled a way to fracture their bones and their shoulders to get out of prison cells, right? And obviously that's much easier said than done. I'm not great at getting into graphic detail like that, so I won't. But it was quite a bloody and grotesque process where when they come out of that cell or that window, they're meted with a hill, right? Like it's a hill down, like that cascades down from the fort. And
they just rolled over.
And they just roll down the hill, and there are people that have found bones, like bones of Seminoles on that hill. Because of course those things were never buried, right? They just kind of laid there. So it's very superficial. And there have been people like playing, and then they just run into something, call the police, obviously, because it's a human remain, and then they're like, oh no, it's a dated 300-plus-year-old bone of a Native American.
And what do they do?
Well, it's conserved.
What do the police do?
I think, because what I remember is that obviously they don't really report it as a crime, especially because they have forensics kind of date the bone and everything, but they do keep it obviously for investigative but also reservation purposes, because the Seminoles have a reserve up there still. So it's it's scary how much I think exists in that one part of land, you know, and that's just one city in Florida, you know, and that's obviously more known because everybody knows of the conflict between, you know, colonizers, Native Americans, indigenous people, right here in Florida. But how much has happened right across this country, and not just to say that it's spooky and it's kind of a cool story, but it's also part of the ghost of the city, right? Yeah. Um so we've kind of talked about our family and what they've known. You've talked about a recent or ghost story that you've
Mm-hmm.
inherited. Um I will also tell everybody here that I've never, I feel like, seen a ghost as much as I have really felt something with me in a room, right? Or like um something looking at me. I felt that a lot in my childhood home, I'll be honest. There was a lot of nights where I would just come down the stairs and I'd be like, "Oh, I feel like something's watching me." And I would look back thinking like my dad or my brother or behind me on the staircase, and there's always nothing. And I would just always kind of wonder like why is that, why do I always feel like something is looking at me? And I know a lot of us will think like, oh, it's because it's dark, and that's like, you know, our mind kind of creates things where there's nothing.
Mm.
But I'm telling you, it's like sometimes it'll be in the morning and my grandma is in the kitchen, like I know I'm going to see someone when I get there, but it was always when was I was on the staircase of my childhood home. Something always felt like it was looking at me.
Maybe somebody in your family died on the stairs,
It
or
wasn't.
someone in general.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think it was my family, but you know, maybe it was someone in the home before us. We lived in Coconut Grove growing up, and Coconut Grove is also a very old city. It has that feeling as well that I was describing that St. Augustine has. Like
Mm.
I know it's very modern right now and you know it's been renovated recently, but there's just something in the air of Coconut Grove that always makes me feel like
This is a separate note, but when I was little, I was always terrified of cemeteries. And then I went to
oh.
a cemetery in Peru, and it's the most beautiful thing in the world. The kids are literally running on top of all the graves
Oh
because the
no.
way that it's not a tombstone. It's like a plaque on the floor,
Mhm.
and so you can't do anything except for walk on top of it. But it's always creeped me out, and I get that feeling. Like, not that someone's watching me, but like
Yeah.
there's something here.
Well, you know, I was told never to walk over. I was taught never to walk over graves.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I would
They'll follow you home
figure
if you
that
do.
too, because of the, like, movies that we see
Yes.
in Western films, but that's how they had it in Peru.
Yeah.
You know, there was no other way to walk, and kids were running, playing, screaming their heads off. And I remember I think I was like 15 when I first saw it, because it was to go see my grandfather's grave and visit him.
I wonder if that's like an American superstition. Because I feel like
I'm
even
pretty
in movies,
sure.
you always see people walking up like certain like aisles in a cemetery because they kind of organize, you know,
Right.
burials that way so that there's like a walking aisle.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to an American cemetery, a Peruvian cemetery, and a Japanese cemetery, and they all look completely different. So I'm sure that's based off
So
American
interesting.
superstitions.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think whenever I would go to a cemetery, I instantly think like, where's the headstone? Where's the footstone? All right,
Mhm.
walk, you know. Yeah. Sometimes when I visit cemeteries now, I always think like I think about my other cousin who also had a superstition of if you breathe around a cemetery, a ghost will follow you home.
Okay, that's a little insane.
Yeah. So she would we would be in the car driving, and then she'd be like, "Oh, cemetery."
That's too much.
And I'd be like, "We're at a red light," and then she'd be like, "Mm-mm, mm-mm."
That's like the other superstition. You hold your breath when you're going through a tunnel and you make a wish at the end if you make it all the way.
What is it with holding your breath and driving?
I don't know. People just like to challenge their mortality, I guess.
Oh my god, that's so true. Make a wish because guess what? You're dead.
Oh. Oh man.
That's so true. I feel like I could talk about ghost stories forever.
Same.
There's a special bond with life and death that I feel like we could always re-explore again. Ghosts is just one of them, right?
Well, I guess it's the nature of storytelling, right?
The nature of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get a shirt, and that's gonna be my shirt. The nature of storytelling.
With your Library of Congress bag.
With my Library of Congress bag that Pam got me from Washington D.C. I love.
Just screams librarian.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And without further ado, you see that right there? That
It's a sign.
that's a sign. That's a sign that the cards are impatient and they want to be read. I think I really invite people to not, when I say this, I do not mean pick up a Ouija board and go home and start communicating. But I'm going to say it anyway, right? I invite people to explore the idea, right, of ghosts because whether you're thinking of like a funny, a way to do that, like go to Target and pick up a Ouija board at Target, a Barbie Ouija board at Target. But what I really would encourage is that you think about, right, when something leaves this earth, whether it be physical, metaphysical, what are the traces that it leaves behind? And how does it affect, right, everything that still remains, including yourself?
Right, like pay attention to the signs or the timings of things.
The effect, the ripples that we talked about in our death episode. There's definitely ripples that go just beyond grief and sadness, right? There's ripples of energy, what you were saying before, right? And effect. And be okay with that because I feel like the more you fight things, the more aggressive they become. Maybe unnecessarily.
Yeah. I think as you were saying that, what came up to my head for today's tarot pool and Halloween in general, since we're talking about ghosts in the afterlife, and we've touched upon the idea that sometimes, they stay here because they may still have things to do. They might not be able to let go and move on. So in the spirit of, I don't know if Pam, would encourage you to go out and get a Ouija board. But in the spirit of
I would
exploring what these opportunities can bring, right? Because being able to see and pay attention to what those signs of ghosts are, whether you believe in them or not, right? Being able to attune with the supernatural and the metaphysical, I think, is something that is part of also honing in on listening to your intuition, because there are things that are not explained, right? So how can we better listen to signs, whether they be from ghosts or religion, if you believe in God, if that's how you believe that they manifest themselves, the way that Tess was mentioning earlier, that these gods would appear. How can we what can we do, right, to help us receive those messages a little clearer, or and how can they help us? I think those are the things that I want to ask the cards today. And then, of course, anything extra that they want to add in terms of Halloween or maybe the season or something we should pay attention to. So, could you mind holding
the top.
Okay, so like I mentioned, I'm gonna go ahead and ask the cards. Today we're just using Tess's, what are these called?
That's just the actual they're just borderless Raider weight.
Borderless, okay.
Yeah. Very classic tarot deck today.
Okay. I'm gonna pull a clarification card for this King of Wands in reverse.
I think your frog just stood up, you know? The anticipation. Antissa.
Can we get a clarifying card, please, for the King of Wands?
Oh,
Okay.
oh.
Okay.
The Seven of Swords.
Tess, do you have your phone on you or your laptop? Can you just look up King of Wands for me, please?
Of course.
In reverse. So, the reason why Tess and I were kind of laughing nervously is because the card that came up first was the Death card, which I think is very appropriate, right? Then afterwards, we got the King of Wands in reverse, and then we got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of Swords. I count them because I'm not good at reading Roman numerals, you guys, but that's okay. And the bottom of the deck is the Page of Cups, but it's not really calling to me. I don't think it's any extra information that we need to know. So we're just going to go ahead and handle these 3 cards for today. And I kind of have an idea, but I want to be sure. So today I'm using the resource biddytarot.com. I know I've mentioned it before. It's a great resource to use if you're learning tarot or want to teach yourself. BIDDY tarot.com. And so for the King of Wands, upright, or at least the general description, it says the King of Wands sits on his throne, holding a blossoming wand in his hand, a symbol of life and creativity. His throne and cape are decorated with lions and salamanders, both symbols of fire and strength. The salamanders biting their own tails represent infinity and the ongoing drive to move forward against all obstacles. And then in reverse, it says, the King of Wands reverse suggests that while you are in a leadership position, you are not ready to step into that role. You may be the creative or visionary person in your work, but you have not yet developed a sense of comfort with leading others towards your vision. You may need to work on your leadership skills or enlist the support of someone who has a natural talent at steering others toward a common goal. Alternatively, you may manage others but are not leading others. You are assigning tasks and monitoring performance, but you're not communicating the vision and engaging your team to take responsibility for bringing the concept to life. You may think you are the only person who can make this vision a reality, even when your team is here to support you. At times, the reverse King of Wands can be aggressive and even arrogant in the pursuit of his goals. Be mindful that as you strive towards your dream, you are not putting others offside, disempowering them, or taking their contributions for granted. You need their support 100% of the way. Also, don't let success get to your head, thinking you're above everyone else just because you are the leader. Consider embracing the concept of followership, the ability to take direction, be part of a team, and deliver on what is expected of you, even as the official leader of the group. On a personal level, the King of Wands reversed warns you against setting unrealistic expectations of yourself and others. While you are highly ambitious, you may be setting yourself up for failure if you set goals that are significantly out of reach and then pushing hard to reach those unattainable goals. You may also be prone to get swept up in the hype of other people's goals to 10x your sales or create the next billion-dollar business. You don't have to buy into other people's dreams and visions and hype. Stay true to what's important to you and keep focused on your personal vision and direction. Okay, so this makes sense, right? One of the things that I was going to say about the King of Wands is, of course, wand energy is fire energy. It's action energy. It's all about going and getting. And the king is this, it's masculine energy, right? It's the idea that you have mastered the masculine side of fire. Usually that's what happens when the queen or the king shows up. It's a mastery of the feminine with the queen and a mastery of the masculine with the king, right? Of whatever the energy of that card is, of what that card is invoking. And because fire energy is very go and let's get it done and it's quick and it's fast burning, a lot of the times it's kind of what the description was warning against, right? Don't be so arrogant. Don't think that you can have a power over these spirits, over these apparitions, whatever they may be. A lot of the times, and I think the reason why the death guard is here as well is to remind us of our mortality, right? A lot of the times as humans, we become very naive, we become very egocentric, and we think that we are above everyone else, even things that will clearly be more powerful than us. Um, and it's part of the reason why I don't advocate for people to just willingly go and buy a Ouija board and just do it, right? Because those things originate from something. You don't know where they originate from. And so be educated about what practices you are going to try to pursue, to whether your interest is to connect with the spiritual realm or whatever it may be, right? We've kind of This kind of information has also showed up in our previous podcast. So the same warnings and echoes of the same message is very present here. And what I find particularly interesting is the concept that death is here, and so is the King of Wands in reverse, and the mention of the salamander eating its tail, and this idea of this cycle, right? So I think it's also reminding us to not be scared, because the other reaction to meeting the ghost or the afterlife or dealing with death is a negative one, right? Of grief, of remaining in grief, of being scared and opposed and not wanting to accept um, the inevitable. And I think it's also a good reminder for those of you who may be apprehensive. There might be something or someone out there in your life or from a past life who may be trying to communicate with you, right? And give you some sort of guidance or shed some light on something. But we may be too afraid to really pay attention to them. Or we might think we don't need anything else or anybody else, however that may look like for you, and they're there. Or it could be very much that complex of me versus the world, right? And you're not willing to accept the help from others. Um, and there may be ways in which they are trying to communicate with you, whether that be appearing, whether that be like how Kat sees it and noticing all of these animals appear that used to be her uncle's favorite animal, or paying attention to signs that show up in specific moments of your life. So, having a humbled understanding and humbling yourself before starting your journey with learning how to receive these messages, I think is critical, especially because we have the Seven of Swords here. So, the Seven of Swords shows a man who's carrying five and is looking behind at two, and he wants to do it all and wants to do it all himself, but he can't. The Seven of Swords, I've mentioned this before as well. Chronologically, the one that comes after is the Eight of Swords, where the figure is surrounded by swords and it looks like they're tied up, but they're not. The Nine of Swords, where then they are physically trapped, and they feel like they can't do anything about it, to ultimately the Ten of Swords, when you can become so overwhelmed that it becomes your death, right? You get so overwhelmed with all these swords, the swords are all impaling on a figure. And so I think it's what's really echoing here is the idea of look to the past and hang on to, not necessarily hang on to the past, but learn from the past to be able to move forward into the future. um and know that it may look scary and ghosts may be scary, and the idea of them, right? Like, even with how Tessa's cousin, she doesn't know how to handle being able to see apparitions, and is noticing that they get more aggressive when they realize that she can see them. Who's to say, absolutely they could have bad intentions, but they might also have good intentions, so it's up to you whether you decide to harness that sort of power, if that lives in you, if you are fortunate, or I guess depending on your perspective, unfortunate enough to have them. But there's a reason for them, right? And so I just think it's trying to steer us away from ignorance and move away from the idea that ignorance is bliss. Because another thing that comes up just with really the death card and the seven of swords being next to each other, the seven of swords, there's a battle in the background in the Raider Waite depiction, and there are these tents. And in the card, the sun's coming up, there's towers in the back, but there is somebody who's dead on the floor who looks like royalty. There's other people that are kind of, they look like they're begging to the night of death. And so it's almost to me like another reminder of that cliche, right? History repeats itself if we don't learn from it. And so it's not to say that you should look behind and stay stuck in the past, but learn from the past. Then and the past can teach you things, whether that be the historical context that comes with ghost stories, whether that be somebody from your past or a past life that it may be coming through and trying to send you a message. Or anything else, but don't feel like you have to do everything. you know Everything has its place, so do you. And with the King of Wands in reverse, it's reminding us like you're not all on your own. If you have friends, if you think that you want to pursue honing this gift you think you might have, maybe trying to find a mentor or something like that, or even find people who share your experience and who may have more experience with it. And I think it's really just trying to move us away from this idea. More so, I think it's less of the egotistical, oh, I could do it all. I think it's really trying to warn us against this mentality of me versus the world, and reassuring us that you are not alone. And I think it's also really beautiful because one of the first things that Tess, Kat, and I, when we sat down and thought about what we wanted our podcast to be about, who we wanted our audience to be, the first things that kind of unanimously came across the three of us is that we wanted this to be a safe space. We wanted this to be a place where we could talk about the difficult things. We could talk about things that make us maybe uncomfortable, but give it a sort of lighthearted, heartwarming feeling to know that, you are not alone. We are not alone. We are all here together. And so I really hope that this platform, this community that we're slowly trying to build, becomes that for you. And this read has been a really good reminder of our why for me and for this episode. And so if there is somebody out there who may feel this way, if you feel that I'm alone, I don't have anyone to go to, I have no one to talk to about certain things, please know that I am in the process still of trying to make a Discord server for this podcast, because I think it would be really great to have a community of us and a safe space, right, for all of us to share. Not necessarily everybody trauma dumping everything, but at the very least have some sort of this feeling of camaraderie, right, and this feeling of and this sense of community, and that you have a community that you can lean on, because it's hard. Nobody can do it alone, not even a king, and this king's up on its head. So whatever he had on his plate, maybe it's an eventful October month
Yeah.
with back-to-back
Yeah.
trips and work
Yeah.
and events.
Shout out to Kat.
We're all here,
Yeah.
and we all play a part, and we all always step up whenever we see that help is needed, So that is what the cards have for us today
Very nice.
on this hallowed day.
On this Hallowed Eve's day.
Would it be Eve if
All
it's on the
Hallows
31st?
Eve. The 31st is
Oh,
Hallows
okay.
Eve. Yeah. Yeah.
Then yes.
Yeah. Hallows Eve. That's where Halloween started. Yeah. Just
That's why
to look back.
Halloween Eve is like Hallows
Halloween.
Eve.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It just got shortened to Halloween, I guess.
Yeah.
And with that, I think just a reminder that, we can't do it all, and we can't know it all either. So ghosts are definitely our daily reminder to just be uncomfortable with the unknown, because we cannot control everything.
Yeah.
Um, thank you, Pam, for that.
No
It was
problem.
wonderful. I was feeling that energy right off the bat. Like when you read the description, I was like, oh, cards are
Mhm.
hitting us today.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it. It's a lot. It's a lot to say. It's a lot of energy going past there. But more importantly, happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween.
You've made it to the end of our spooky series. You've made it to Halloween, the last day in October.
Go get yourself some candy.
Go get yourself some candy.
Enjoy it.
Enjoy it.
Wear that costume.
Wear that costume.
Celebrate it however you celebrate it.
Word. And more importantly, have fun
And be safe.
and be safe.
Check your chocolate if you're going out trick or treating. People be sneaky nowadays.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.